vlogging, real estate interiors, real estate exteriors, architecture, establishing shots for filmmaking. A good wide-angle lens is crucial for every single one of those scenarios, and that's not even an exhaustive list. So to summarize the intro to this video, if you're serious about your videography or photography, you most definitely need to be packing a proper wide-angle lens in your arsenal. I had you, didn't I? Welcome to Fulan Creative YouTube channel, where we do gear reviews, tips, tricks, and how-tos for creative professionals and entrepreneurs. In this video, we're going to be discussing the best budget wide-angle lens option available for Canon APS-C. So in reality, as far as what's currently available on the market, you really only have two choices: the Canon 10-18 image stabilized STM lens and the TOKINA 11-16 f2.8. These are the best two choices in terms of lens performance and value for the money. And of these two, each lens has its strengths and its weaknesses when compared to the other. So the one that you end up choosing depends on your personal shooting style and your own needs and preferences. And it's not a super easy choice because both lenses provide a lot of value for the money. But I'm going to take the pros and the cons of both lenses and simplify it for you, and also show you some footage so that you can make sure that you make the right decision for you. And if you hang around to the end of the video, I'm going to give you some tips, tricks, and hacks that'll help to make sure you get the most cinematic and professional footage regardless of which of these two lens options you go with. So let's start off by talking about the Canon 10-18. This lens comes in at $300 new. When weighing the pros and the cons, this is the lens that I prefer because it best fits my shooting style, and you're getting a whole lot of bang for your $300. So at its widest, this lens is 10 millimeters. And if you factor in the APS-C crop, it's giving you about an equivalent field of view of around 16 millimeters. Now for me, 16 millimeters is the sweet spot, where it's wide enough to be used in all the scenarios that I need, but not so wide that the image is all distorted and unnatural, like those ultra-wide fisheye lenses that got you looking like you're standing in one of those funhouse mirrors with one eye bigger than the other one, looking all crazy. The lens is made of high-quality plastic, so being that it's not made out of metal, the weight is very light, which is actually an advantage when you have to hold it out for vlogging for extended periods of time. And the build quality is surprisingly good. It doesn't feel cheap. The focusing ring and the zoom rings are smooth and have just the right amount of resistance to where it's not too easy and not too hard to move them. The autofocus on this lens is quick, snappy, and reliable. And its biggest advantage over the TOKINA is that the autofocus is completely silent. Another advantage of this lens over the TOKINA is that the lens has image stabilization, which is going to help you out a lot if you're binge drinking that coffee like me and your hands are super shaky. In terms of the image quality for video and for stills, there's no real major optical issues with this lens, so it's going to perform great for filmmakers and for photographers alike. The biggest weakness of this lens, however, is that the aperture at its widest is only 4.5, so it's not going to perform well in low light scenarios. So if you're like me and you're mainly going to be using this lens outdoors, then there's no issue. There's more than enough light, and sometimes you even need to stop down the lens or use an ND filter because there's too much light outside. However, if you're going to be using this lens indoors, especially under studio lights, then the f4.5 aperture might be an issue for you. But at the end of the video, I'll show you some workarounds that'll help you use this lens indoors without any issue. Links are in the description for both of these lenses, as well as other studio gear that I found valuable and helpful. And now we have the TOKINA 11-16. This lens comes in at $500 brand new, so it's significantly higher priced than the Canon 10-18. The main advantage of this lens over the 10-18 is the f2.8 aperture, so it's going to give you better performance in low light scenarios, and it's going to have a shallower depth of field, meaning you get a blurrier background. And the major disadvantage of this lens, and the reason why I didn't choose it over the 10-18, is that the autofocusing motor is extremely noisy. And if you're using this lens to vlog or capture any type of video where the audio is important, your microphone is most definitely going to pick up the autofocusing motor noise. The other major disadvantage of this lens over the 10-18 is that it doesn't have image stabilization. But if your camera has IBIS or even the digital stabilization, usually that's enough. And this wasn't a big factor for me when making my choice. Mostly it was the autofocusing noise and the price tag that made me choose the 10-18 over this one. In terms of image quality, there's no real major optical flaws with this lens, especially for video. You may get a little bit of chromatic aberration for photos, but you can always fix that in post. The colors on the lens are good, the image is sharp enough, and the autofocus is accurate, snappy, and reliable. And I would say that the image quality is extremely good. If you happen to find an older, used copy of this lens, lens, then you're going to get a lot of value out of this lens for your money. But in terms of picking it up for $500, I think it might be slightly overpriced. A lot of people who use this lens for vlogging try to get around the autofocusing noise issue by putting it in manual focus mode and making sure that they hold the lens out at a fixed distance so that their face stays in focus. But I don't find that really practical, especially for run and gun style shooting. So at the end of the video, I'll share with you the solution that I found so that you could still be able to use this lens for vlogging in spite of the autofocus noise issues. So to sum up these two lenses, both provide amazing value for the money. Now if the f4.5 aperture on the 10-18 isn't an issue for you, then the choice is a no-brainer. The 10-18 comes in at about $200 cheaper, has image stabilization, and has a silent autofocus motor. And for those reasons, I think it's a better value for money. Now if you really need that f2.8 aperture and you're going to be shooting indoors a lot and that low light is a big deal for you and you don't mind forking over the extra $200, then the TOKINA 11-16 might be the way to go for you. Now before we move on to the tips and tricks, I gotta tell you, there is a new lens on the market that takes both of these lenses and combines the best of both of them and merges them into one lens. And it's the TOKINA 12mm f2 APS-C lens. The only problem is that currently it's not available for Canon. I've seen it for Sony E-mount, and here's the lowdown on that lens. It's only about $300. The autofocus is snappy, accurate, and completely silent. The aperture is f2, so it's going to do even better than the TOKINA. The autofocus elements, also known as the bokeh, on the lens are extremely smooth for a wide-angle lens, and the image that it produces is beautiful. Hands down, if I could buy that lens, I would sell my 10-18 yesterday, and I'd pick up that TOKINA right away. I'm hoping that it's going to come out for Canon APS-C soon, and when and if it does, I'll add the link to the description below. Who knows, by the time you're seeing this video, it might already be out. But be careful, because there's an older version of this lens that looks very similar and is priced similar, but it doesn't have autofocus at all. So make sure you pick up the new one that specifically says AF on it. And now moving on to my tips and tricks if you own one of these two lenses that I was talking about. So for the 10-18, the issue is the 4.5 aperture, which is not going to perform the best indoors. So before I give you my main tip, first I'm going to qualify it by saying get yourself a proper key light and a softbox. The light that I'm using right now is called the Godox SL60W, and you could pick this light up for about $130. You can also get a $60 120 centimeter softbox, and for about $200 you're going to get something that's going to improve your indoor footage leaps and bounds above any lens upgrade or even camera body upgrade. If you don't have a proper key light, then that should be your first priority, as that's the first step into getting beautiful images indoors. And the SL60 is the best value for money. Although there's a new light from Aperture, I think it's called the Amaran 100D. If you have the extra $70, I would go with that light over the Godox. Now let's say you're in a situation where you can't pick up either one of these lights at the moment, then at that point I would say shoot only in locations where you're getting proper window lighting. So let's say you're indoors, you have good lighting, everything is good, you're using the 10-18, but still you're having to turn the ISO up too high and it's introducing noise into the image. So then in that case, what can you do so that you get a better image from this lens? I'll tell you a little trick that I came across. This is only going to be used in limited situations. You can't use this for everything. But if what you're filming is just a talking head shot like I'm doing right now, and there's not a lot of movement or quick motion in the footage, what you can do is you can lower your shutter speed. You could lower it to 40 or even try and 30 and see how the footage comes out. And what that does is that it allows your lens to capture more light. So it's as if your f4.5 lens turns into a f4 or f3.5 depending on how low you make that shutter speed. But the unintended consequences of doing that is that it introduces more motion blur into your video, and it may not look right. It may look choppy and the motion may be unnatural. But again, if it's just a talking head shot and there's no real movement going on, then many times you'll be able to get away with it. And that way you may be able to use that hack to get a better quality image and low light situations out of this f4.5 lens. Now for the TOKINA lens and the autofocus noise that it makes, the solution is quite simple. You would just pick up one of these. This is the Tascam DR10L portable recorder, and it comes with a lav mic. Instead of mounting your shotgun mic on top of your camera, you would just take your lav mic and run it into that Tascam DR10L and put it in your pocket. That way the lav mic on your chest is not going to pick up the autofocus noise coming from the lens, which is significantly further away from the mic. The only thing is that you're going to have to sync up that audio in post. And for that, it's pretty easy. You just hit record on your audio recorder, and then you would hit record on your camera, and the first thing that you would do is a clap test. And what that is you're going to see a distinct part of your waveform where the clap is perfectly visible. As you see the audio, you're going to see most of it like at the normal levels, and then you're going to see this big humongous spike which represents the clap sound. Then what you would do is you would just align that sound with the motion of your hands coming together. So you would just freeze the frame where your hands come together and line up that clapping sound with that, and then the rest of your audio would be automatically synced. The other issue with the TOKINA is that it doesn't have image stabilization, so the footage is going to be a little bit more shaky. Some people use both of these lenses for micro four thirds, and many of those micro four thirds cameras have the best IBIS on the market. But if you're using the Canon camera like me, then you got to make sure you turn on the digital image stabilization. Now don't put it on the enhanced, as it introduces all types of warping and doesn't look nice. Just turn on the normal digital stabilization and that should be fine. Along with that, what you want to do is, instead of holding the camera out in your hand where it could be shaky, you want to get a Gorilla Pod, or I got a cheaper one because when I use it with the M50 is pretty light and that lens is light, so this is fine. I think there's a company called Ulanzi or something like that that makes something like this, and I'll put the link in the description. And what this is just a tripod. Now it's bendy. I can bend it however I want, so I can use it basically to vlog with. And when you're holding it like this and it's screwed into the bottom of the camera, it's more balanced, so you tend to get a more stable image than if you were just holding the camera out like this by itself. Something like that should help you reduce the shake that you're going to get from the TOKINA 11-16 when holding it out for vlogging. Now if you're using the Canon M50, the M6 Mark II, the 90D, 80D, EOS R, EOS RP, or any of those cameras, and you're looking for a simple guide to help you get cinematic footage out of your camera, then make sure you check out that video below, as it contains all types of valuable tips. Hope that helps, guys. So until next time, it's your boy Fulan. See you in the next video. Peace.